if they are comfortable with their role.
Okay.
No, their role is legitimate in the way that they play that in other nation states across the world.
We've heard all this wonderful.
No, they don't. They arrive here irregularly.
Forgive me, it's my time now, Mr. Solomon. I think.
Ooh. How does this bonkers swivel-eyed loon of a Tory MP, Jill Mortimer, get beautifully owned by Enver Solomon, Chief Executive for Refugee Council? And I'll leave the information in the description box below if you want to know who the other witnesses were in this Human Rights Joint Committee meeting on the safety on the Rwanda Bill on the 17th of January, where Tory loon Jill Mortimer thinks she's got a bit of a zinger to catch out these experts.
Just come in, you're both very adamant that Rwanda isn't safe at all for refugees and asylum seekers. So can you explain to me how comfortable you are then with the UNHCR using that as its emergency transport mechanism base for refugees and asylum seekers, and for indeed even funding scholarships for refugees to attend Rwandan universities?
Well, I'm happy to respond in the sense that the Supreme Court was happy with the UNHCR's evidence, and that's our domestic court taking that factual assessment. So in terms of the UNHCR's quality of evidence, I think if it's good enough for our Supreme Court, it's good enough for me.
That's not the question. I completely agree that the Supreme Court looked at the UNHCR evidence and it had to apply that evidence under previous case law. It had to give it the proper weight. What I'm asking you is how comfortable are you that the UNHCR use Rwanda as its base? They fly asylum seekers and refugees there in great numbers. They use that as their base for their emergency transport mechanism, and indeed they even fund scholarships for refugees to attend Rwandan universities. If it is so unsafe, how comfortable are you with the fact that the UNHCR do that?
Well, Justice isn't a refugee charity and we don't work in countries, so our kind of assessment or view on, we don't have a view on the UNHCR.
Personal view, do you know, how comfortable are you that they are doing that when you think it is so unsafe?
I'm happy to come in if you don't mind. So I think there's two things here. I think the MEDP, the Migration Economic Development Partnership, and remember that was the judgment, the Supreme Court judgment was looking at that agreement, is wholly different than the arrangement that the UNHCR has to house refugees in Rwanda affected by the war in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Libya.
And Libya.
People who have migrated to Libya.
If you just let me finish, in relation to regional conflicts and its operations there. That is a different arrangement, refugee arrangement, than the Migration and Economic Development Partnership. The two, I do not think, are comparable because they don't involve a individual sovereign state receiving people that have come under the UN Convention seeking asylum and then them being transferred under agreement, in this case the MEDP, against their will to then be put through a different sovereign state's asylum system. That is a wholly different arrangement than the arrangements that you are referring to. And given that, I don't think they're compatible.
But it's still a fact of whether it's safe.
But you have to accept my point, don't you not, that those two arrangements are entirely different, and therefore they are not compatible.
But there can be arrangements that are safe in Rwanda.
The two arrangements are not the same, and therefore are not compatible. You're asking whether Rwanda is safe, and I want to quote to you documents released on Thursday by the government, a whole evidence pack, and I quote from them. They say, while Rwanda is now a relatively peaceful country with respect for the rule of law, there are nevertheless issues with its human rights record around political opposition to the current regime, dissent and free speech. That is the conclusion of the British government's assessment in its own evidence pack published on Thursday. And just in addition to that, I would reference the fact that there have been individuals that have come to the UK, and Home Office data shows this, from Rwanda, Rwandan nationals, applying for asylum in the UK, and their cases have been assessed by Home Office decision makers, and they have been granted asylum in the UK. And I think that relates to that comment and conclusion in the evidence pack published by the government last Thursday.
Thank you for your very comprehensive answer, Mr. Solomon. But the question I was asking was not if Rwanda was safe. It was your level of comfort with the UNHCR putting, refugees into their universities. They clearly think it's safe if they're giving them scholarships. So how comfortable are you with that? Not having the discussion about whether it's safe or not.
No. So I think
comfortable you are with.
I absolutely think that's a legitimate question, but my organisation does not operate and provide services for refugees in Rwanda. That's a question you should ask the UNHCR. The point that I'm making from the expertise within my organisation is that arrangement is a different arrangement that is not comparable to what I've explained is the externalisation arrangement under the MEDP. And our assessment of the externalisation arrangement under the MEDP is that it's not an appropriate arrangement and is in breach of those individual human rights. You'll have to ask the UNHCR if they are comfortable with their role.
Okay.
No, their role is legitimate in the way that they play that in other nation states across the world.
I think it's a question well made and a question well answered, and
Awesome.
Not happy with those replies, Jill? Well, maybe Zoe Bantleman can put your mind at rest.
That, as I would say in relation to Ms Mortimer's question, the real question is, for the United Kingdom, what does its human rights and other international legal obligations require of it? Not what other states require of them, not what international organisations may have as their legal obligations, but those of the UK. And if removing, extraditing, deporting any individual to another country would breach the UK's international legal obligations, ILPA would say the United Kingdom should not do so in breach of its obligations. It has signed up to an international rules-based order voluntarily, and it should not seek to undermine that.
Well, that should put our bonkers Tory MP Jill Mortimer's mind at rest now. No. She then went on to show how far her ignorance really goes, and then she decides to ask the all-important question.
I would take issue with that, because anybody who arrives on a small boat arrives here illegally. That's the first thing. But then we've heard all this wonderful...
No, they don't. They arrive here irregularly.
Forgive me, it's my time now, Mr Solomon.
I think, and just intervene here, I think we have a fundamental disagreement.
Yes, so can I speak?
Anyone who arrives here arrives illegally in terms of UK law.
Yes.
They are not arriving illegally in terms of international law.
Well, we are in the UK.
Yes,
so
but the United Kingdom has signed up to many international treaties.
Correct,
and it's trite law. Any undergraduate law student knows that merely by changing your domestic law, you do not change your international law obligations. I think most lawyers would recognise that. I just want to make that point.
Well, most lawyers
but
would
I accept your view that in terms of UK
UK
law, it is an illegal arrival. I think what Enver was saying, that in terms of international law, it's not.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think you should ask
under
your
domestic
question's
law,
important.
they are illegal arrivals. So, but taking that, I want to strip away a lot of this academic hypothetical argument, but I will stick with Rishi, if I may, and I'll stick with Rishi, who's been tortured and he's in France about to get on a boat. Do you think that if we go back to the kernel of the intent of this bill, assuming the fact that Rishi, when he's in a campus in Calais, will have been advised by refugee charities over there of his rights, do you think that being told what could happen to him under this bill will deter him from entering a contract with an illegal gang to go into probably some sort of slavery arrangement over here to pay for his crossing, and stop him stepping foot in that boat and undertaking an incredibly dangerous crossing? Will it deter him? It's a yes or no, because I have to leave.
No.
You won't think it'll deter him? Okay.
Well, you can't get more emphatic than that, can you? But forgive me, Jill. You're not very bright, are you? Clearly, she also thinks she's far more intelligent than she actually is. But in my mind, for me, she's just a bit of a gonk. And the thing is, all I could do was, while watching that, was piss myself laughing at the nonsense she was spouting. What a pancake, eh? But what do you guys think? Let me know down below, and I shall bid you farewell and take care, my friends.